Prime Minister is defending the inclusion of additional tax cuts in the budget, which come with a $17 billion price tag. The opposition leader has labelled the move an election bribe. In the cuts announced last night, the average worker will save $268 a year from July next year and $536 the year after. There were changes to industrial relations too. Employees on less than $175,000 a year could benefit from a ban on non-compete clauses. And higher wages for childcare and aged care workers have been locked in. Labor's other cost of living pledges include electricity rebates, and we already knew about plans to increase Medicare and cut the cost of PBS scripts, which the Coalition is backing. Some of the measures will be decided at the election, which we are expecting the Prime Minister to call within days. Now, for more on this, political reporter Pablo Viñales joins us now from Parliament House. Pablo, firstly, can you talk us through some of the main measures announced last night?
Gemma, good morning. Well, these so-called top-up tax cuts are being described as modest but meaningful. Every worker will essentially receive a tax cut from next year, and that will be increased from the year after. So in 2027, the bottom tax scale will be brought down, and that will then flow on to the income scale, eventually leaving Australians $536 better off when this tax cut is fully implemented. Of course, it'll cost the budget about $17 billion. Now, the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, has been doing the post-budget sell this morning, selling this as significant cost of living relief.
These tax cut top-ups are all about helping people with the cost of living, and the two together is an additional $10 a week, which takes the total to about $50 a week on average. There'll always be an appetite for us to do more. We understand that. These are modest in isolation but meaningful when you combine them with the other tax cuts we're providing, as well as all of the other cost of living relief.
So Jim Chalmers there speaking about these tax cuts in the context of the changes to Stage 3 tax cuts, which came into effect last year. There have also been some changes that may not necessarily affect the budget bottom line, but a change to the non-compliance or non-compete clauses that will impact around 3 million workers. The government says this will help workers in areas like construction and childcare, where they are bound by strict non-compete clauses when they sign up to a contract, and they're stuck when they potentially want to move to another workplace. So this will the government is arguing help workers on wages up to $175,000 to be able to move on to a different employer if they decide to finish up at the workplace that they are at. Of course, you mentioned earlier the energy bill relief as well, $1.8 billion in the budget. That will come into effect from July this year, $150 off power bills to be applied in quarterly instalments as well. And some of the main or the big ticket items had already been announced before last night's budget, that $8.5 billion of money going towards Medicare to increase the rate of bulk billings, some $689 million going to the pharmaceutical benefit scheme to bring down the cost of scripts on the PBS down to $25. And about $650 million Labor had already promised to build 50 new urgent care clinics around the country. Jim Chalmers last night also spoke about the global uncertainty in the global economy, namely as a result of the return of Donald Trump's America First agenda and the concern around a broader global trade war. He was the Prime Minister speaking this morning about how he believes, though, that the Australian economy is resilient enough to withstand this.
And what we're doing is governing for all Australians, no matter where they live. And that's why we have had a comprehensive plan since we came to government, whether it be turning the corner on the economy.
Pablo, what has been the Coalition's response?
Well, the opposition last night was quick to say that it would not support these tax cuts at a cost of $17 billion, calling them a cruel hoax. Now, Peter Dutton is due to give his budget in reply speech on Thursday night, and he's foreshadowing a significant announcement that the Coalition will make on Thursday. But he is taking issue with these tax cuts.
What's obvious here is that a 70-cent a day tax cut in 15 months' time is just not going to help families today who are really suffering. I mean, Labor's created not just an economic crisis, not just a housing crisis, but a crisis of confidence, and there are a lot of people across the country who are working harder than ever before, and they just know that this government's budget has made it even harder for them to pay their bills.
Now, the opposition has kept the door open to having or to presenting bigger personal income tax cuts. So we'll wait and see what the opposition has to say in response on Thursday night. Now, of course, we know that after back-to-back surpluses, the budget has returned to back-to-back deficits. The deficit this year going to $27.6 billion and around $42 billion in deficit the year after that. And that is forecast to grow over the next few years. Gemma, it is worth noting there have been in last night's budget about $30 billion in new spending. That has been paid for by $36 billion in windfall revenue. And there's also around more than $1 billion that has been set aside in decisions taken, not yet announced. Essentially, money that has been put aside, which you imagine the government will be using as it calls an election, perhaps within as early as the next few days, as some election sweeteners as it seeks a re-election mandate. Gemma.
Pablo Vinales at Parliament House, thank you. Police have made a series of arrests as they try and stop the theft and sale of illicit tobacco by organised crime groups in Sydney. Miles Holbrook Walk is in Parramatta, where police will soon give more details about the charges and arrests. Miles, can you tell us more about these raids and arrests?
Yeah, Gemma, it's been some extraordinary police work with dramatic vision emerging this morning from a series of raids where a bunch of men were arrested and charged in separate incidents. And it's worth just going back more than a year, in fact, to March 2024, where these incidents first started arising in Sydney around the distribution and presence of illegal tobacco, something that police have been concerned about spilling over the border from Victoria into New South Wales. And Victoria, it's a known and long-running issue, the illicit trade of tobacco that's been reported on extensively. But in New South Wales, it had become less prominent until last year. And then police identified a spate of incidents where storage units, for example, were being raided by what police allege are organised crime networks looking to profit out of the sale of illegal tobacco. And they say that crime networks, in some instances, look to target this industry largely because of the increasing price of tobacco within Australia. And as such, this illegal market has grown nationally. We hear that from federal officials, from Border Force and the Australian Federal Police, and now New South Wales Police making a series of arrests in this regard. Now, these incidents both at Casula, Guildford and other parts of southwest Sydney saw huge volumes of tobacco seized. In one instance, about a tonne of tobacco seized all up, and about $10,000, it's estimated, worth of cigarette papers as well stolen without any arrests at the time of the incident made. However, there was a police strike force formed that has since been looking at this closely over a 6-month period from September last year right until March, late March of course, and this week it culminated in a series of arrests, raids and subsequent charges. They also relate to one particularly gruesome alleged incident, including the attack and assault of a 38-year-old man who had his toe partially severed during an attempted robbery at one site in southwest Sydney. Among the people arrested and charged is Manasseh Nyadakalo. He's a person who may be better known among Sydney circles by his hip-hop name, Nasa Nova, with several songs receiving millions of streams, and he's been charged with robbery in company and was denied bail when he fronted Parramatta local court yesterday. But he is just one of more than 7 individuals who have been charged over a series of different incidents. It's worth noting that Manasseh Nyadakalo is not charged over that incident in Condell Park that I mentioned earlier, where a man's toe was allegedly partially severed. His was an incident relating to an attempted burglary that took place in Guildford, so allege police. We're going to hear more detail throughout the morning about the means in which police use to be able to make these arrests and charges, as well as potentially which organised crime networks they believe to be at the heart of these operations. Gemma?
Miles Holbrook Walk at Parramatta in Sydney. Thank you. The The White House is downplaying an extraordinary revelation that senior cabinet members discussed plans for a military strike in Yemen in a group chat that included an American journalist. US President Donald Trump has defended his national security advisor, who inadvertently added the journalist. Our North America correspondent Cayman Gok joins us now from Washington, DC. Cayman, how is this playing out there?
Well, the President, Donald Trump, is dismissing and minimalising this stuff up, instead focusing his criticism on the journalist who broke the story and who was inadvertently added to this chat. This is a political tactic that we are seeing from the White House, focusing their attention on the messenger rather than the message. But Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, who appears to be the one who accidentally added The Atlantic's editor, Jeffrey Goldberg, to this private and sensitive conversation, appears to have the president's backing. President Trump says that he doesn't need to apologise, he's doing the best job, and this story is a ploy to divert attention from the good work the administration is doing. When Mike Waltz was asked how this situation came about, here's what he had to say.
This one in particular, I've never met, don't know, never communicated with, and we are looking into and reviewing how the heck he got into this room.
Now, Mr. Goldberg, who was in this chat, says that top advisors were talking about a planned military strike on the Houthis in Yemen earlier this month, an attack which killed dozens of people. The White House and top officials say that no classified information was shared in this chat on the messaging app Signal. But Mr. Goldberg says that's not true, and he says he saw a message from the Secretary of Defence, Pete Hegseth, which outlined time, targets, weapons, and even attack sequences the US would deploy hours before this strike actually occurred. And Democrats have seized on this. They are calling for heads to roll, and they say if there was no classified information, then release the entire transcript of this conversation. This is a particular sticking point for the Democrats because of how the Republicans attacked Hillary Clinton during her period as the Secretary of State, using a private email server to do business. In fact, it's raised questions if, in fact, this has breached the US Espionage Act for using a civilian messaging app to talk about military operations instead of the usual government secure channels.
North America correspondent Cayman Gok, thank you.